Hey, how you doing?
What's up, man? How are you?
I'm doing all right. You're a Bible believer?
I'm Christian.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. How long have you been a Christian for?
Hey, and I hope you don't mind. I gotta make some scrambled eggs. So I'm starving right now.
You're fine. It's okay. I'm
All right,
sure.
thank you.
I'm sure we'll be fine. So yeah, how long have you been a believer
So
for?
I was raised in a Christian home, but I didn't really take it seriously until 19. I'm turning 40 next month,
All
so
right.
I've been at this for over 20 years now.
All right, I got you. And what was it that convinced you that the Bible's true?
I think it's largely deductive reasoning or inductive. Maybe more so inductive. I build arguments in both directions. Um, but for me, it's a layering of evidences that all ostensibly seem to point to God as my buttress. So, well, I have questions, but I'll let you guide the conversation.
Um, sure. What do you think about what I was saying earlier, where in First Corinthians chapter 15 it says that if the resurrection didn't happen, then our faith is in vain as Christians, and how I don't see any evidence that we can point to that says that the resurrection of Jesus was a real historical event, and without being able to say that, I think you would have to admit that your faith is in vain. Um, so how do you approach this?
I think if that were true, if anybody could uh, objectively, or I might even argue subjectively, defeat the cross, then I would personally immediately abandon the faith uh, and maybe encourage other Christians to do the same. Um, but I think that has yet to be done, and it probably never will be. But to date, I think that's the reason why there's 2.38 billion Christians that walk the earth.
Do you think that you have sufficient evidence for the resurrection of Jesus?
I'm sorry, you say sufficient evidence for what was that?
For the resurrection of Jesus.
Yes, I think the majority of it is going to be beyond your aperture, which is why I like to try and keep the conversation in more of a corporeal nature. Um, I think, yeah, I think there's sufficient evidence.
What do you think is the best evidence for the resurrection of Jesus?
Oh, um, well, the Gospels are pretty convincing. I think having four separate accounts that are not verbatim but very similar, which is it follows the pattern that say I'm not sure how familiar you are with forensics or detective work, but that would be a big red flag if you have four different accounts of an event that are um, exactly uh, verbatim, or the depictions are all um, too close to each other. The variation tells a story in and of itself. So I think having, in the same way that if you imagine like a car accident at a stoplight, and you have people trying to cross from the crosswalk at adjacent corners. um, they're all witnessing the same thing, but from different angles. So one person is going to capture certain details, another will capture different details. If one is a woman, she's going to detail it in a different way because women naturally um, do that compared to the male mind. Things like that, variation. Um, I think warrants and grants authenticity.
Sure. So, did you know that originally the original manuscripts that we have from Mark do not include the resurrection of Jesus?
The original manuscripts.
Yeah, that we have from Mark do not include the resurrection of Jesus.
You say from Mark?
Yes, from Mark. And also the synoptic gospels, which are Matthew, Mark, and Luke, are pretty much it's pretty much the scholarly consensus that they have copied from each other. So yeah, I can see it that if, three students in English class copied each other's stories, that they would say the same thing, but that doesn't mean that their stories hold any weight, especially when one of them doesn't include a very vital piece originally that the other two had. So I see the Gospels as a collection of claims. They them as and I think that we need the evidence to verify the claims. So I don't think that just because we have the Gospels, that means that we have evidence to say the resurrection happened. I think that, if we qualify it as evidence at all, it's very, very low on the ladder of good evidence. What do you think of that?
I'd like you to substantiate that, but before you do, if you do, your choice. I think, I consider one thing that I noticed that seems to escape many people. Well, let me ask you, who were the scholars of the age when Jesus was allegedly around teaching and preaching? You know who they were?
In the terms of the Jewish culture?
Yeah.
Like
Or just people in
the
the
religious
regional.
leaders, the Pharisees, the Sadducees.
They were the most studied, were they not?
Sure.
How did things pan out for them?
Jesus rebuked them quite a lot.
Does that catch your attention or not so much?
Not in terms of the resurrection.
I'm not talking just resurrection. I'm talking the.
Are we talking about like just who Jesus was in general?
Well, the nature of their teachings and I guess accuracy of their teachings as well, and ultimately their fates. It seems to me things did not pan out well for them, but they were the people that the masses or majority. In the same model as Catholicism, you have the people who are they depend and rely on their authoritative figures. In that same way, people did that back then with the Pharisees, and there certainly, I think you would agree, was some turbulence, and largely what Jesus did and said regarding those guys when he would address them or respond to their claims or actions or conduct, he exposed them. So the whole point that I'm making here is I think scholars are to be taken not with a grain of salt, but not in an absolute manner as the bearers of truth and merit.
Do you think
Considered?
Paul is
Sure.
someone who is a bearer of truth and merit?
Well, yeah. Not in the same way as scholars, but yes.
Okay, so when Paul says that you need the resurrection, otherwise your faith is in vain, then why are we not looking at what he says and says, all right, we need to be able to say that, we need to be able to show that the resurrection happened, otherwise our faith is in vain? Simply pointing to some texts that were written a long time ago that no one has validated, that this is the thing we're calling into question, this is the thing we're asking about. We can't just say, well, the question's right there, there's your evidence. We have to show the evidence that shows the question is valid. That where is the faith coming from? Is it solid? Yes, because the resurrection actually happened, and here's how we know it happened.
Yeah. I don't see the issue.
So how do we know the resurrection happened? Because we can't just simply go by the Gospels. We have to look at the evidence. Where's the evidence for it?
Yeah, and I think there's a question I've been asking atheists to uh, test their critical thinking skills, and I would love to ask you this question. I think it's not just, you know what, in the same way that atheists are not convinced. Not only am I not convinced by what atheists pitch to support their conclusions and lifestyle and perspective and outlook on the world and the things around us and the different components and mechanics, I am convinced of what the evidence that's available, along with personally empirical experiences that I would never expect you to believe. They work for me. But then also anecdote. I think stories that people tell, they're well, let me just say casually, I vibe with them. If let's say you and I and two other guys throughout the span of X number of years, we all end up at some point meeting some figure, some semi-popular person of some sort, and we get close to them and somewhat intimate, not in a like a
Personal,
sexual
not
way.
sexual. Got you.
Yeah. And after so long, none of us have anything to do with that person. You probably see where this is going. We could, when we tell each other stories about this person, we could identify, yes, that is their character, and they would probably explain this way, and they're like this. It's like that. We resonate with the stories that we tell each other, and they're, I guess, largely green. Well, I guess I shouldn't say green flags. We just recognize the similarities and can compare personality traits and conduct and verbiage and all these different things with each other, and be convinced with in and of ourselves, but also convince each other we got the right person and we're all describing the same person. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I believe you're following, or I'm following you. You're talking about how a group of people, if they really get to know each other and stuff, even if, a member or two end up not being around, the rest of them can reminisce on their character and stuff, and they can identify that person through each other's stories and stuff because they know that person. Is that correct?
Yeah, largely, yeah. That's only superficially though.
Okay.
And this, I know, if I go on beyond this description, it's going to lose you pretty quick. I'm glad that you referenced Paul, because I would reference a handful of other things that Paul said to aid my position, at least. But they're going to start moving into the supernatural realm, and I know atheists never really can follow that stuff, so I try not to go there quite so much.
It's not the
But
sense that we can't follow it. Like, we can grant it to you for the sake of your explanation or your example, but we can't grant it in terms of you've provided the sufficient evidence for us to say that's true.
uh, yeah, okay, agreed. But I would still stick to my guns, and I don't
So,
think you
so
guys can.
what is your question here? You said you had a question, which I would hope that it's in some way related to mine. Where are we going here?
Maybe directly or indirectly. I'm curious. What power does anecdote hold for you? I know that it's insufficient. You don't really have to tell me that. I'm just curious what you might say beyond that.
Yeah, I understand that it can be very powerful to an individual, but I also understand that that isn't valid evidence when trying to convince other people. So when people talk to me about their religious experiences and stuff like that, and how maybe they experience a spiritual healing, and that's how they know that their belief in X is the truth. I understand that that's a very powerful thing to them, and I don't hold that against them. I don't, think of them as being dumb or stupid or anything like that. I understand that they were convinced of this because in their mind they can't see it any other way. And I think that depending on the circumstances, it might be best to not challenge that. If that's what's helping them stay away from, a heroin addiction, for example, that's not something that I ever plan to challenge, no matter what they believe. Because, whether they believe the crystals got them through it, or whether it was Jesus or Allah or whatever the case, they should just keep at it, because that's improving on their well-being. But really, when it comes to, I think that this should, now be a way that other people should live, especially other people who disagree with me. That's where the line has to be drawn in. Well, now you have to actually show that this is the truth if you want to then say that this is part of reality and therefore affects everybody.
Okay, all right. What I meant before, just for clarity, that's a good answer, though. I appreciate it. Um, what I meant before by not follow where we might take you, it's predicated on 1 Corinthians 2:14. That you know what? Let me just go ahead and read it to you real quick here, if you're okay with that.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Oops, wrong chapter.
It's about
All
not
right. It
understanding the
says
spirit, right?
yes.
Yeah.
Well, it's a bit more than that. Um, so it says this: the person without the Spirit, which I'm sure you no doubt deduce is the Holy Spirit, third in the Godhead. The person without the Spirit does not accept the things that come from the Spirit of God, but considers them foolishness, and cannot understand them because they are discerned only through the Spirit. It's interesting to me that atheists, I don't think atheists realize just how much of the Bible they fulfill. Thousands of years ago, men allegedly were inspired by God to pen these different verses in Scripture. And here today, many centuries later, you guys fulfill it to a T. That also, I think, to me, is an evidence of the authenticity and accuracy of the Bible. But to the point.
I think that the reason why it doesn't mean much to me is because it seems kind of like a silly thing to predict, like when the Bible says, "Oh, you'll know, these times are coming because you'll have wars and famines and rumors of wars and pestilence." Like, it's kind of like those no shit that's happening all the time. So when it says like, "Oh, some people aren't going to believe," and that's because they're spiritually blind, like, okay, that's like no shit. Of course, some people aren't going to believe, but you then still have to prove that there is a spiritual blindness or barrier or something, because that's not something that we can just take as truth. Just because there's an explanation for it doesn't mean that explanation is true. You see where I'm going? Like, any religion can say, "Oh, people are not going to believe us." That doesn't mean that religion is true. You know?
Yeah, yeah, I get it. Um, yeah, it is
I'm
kind of
I'm pretty sure the Quran even says that there are going to be disbelievers. So because people like me exist that actively disbelieve and even go against the Quran and Islam in certain factors, um, am I fulfilling the Quran? Does that mean Islam is correct?
well, I think it's a vague claim, which I think most people would agree. Like, that's almost like, the if you call into those psychic hotlines, they say the most vague things like, "I see that you're a human that is breathing currently." Like it's
Oh,
applicable to everybody. I get
actually,
that.
could I tell you a quick story about that, which is
Yeah,
fascinating?
yeah.
So, I love having these conversations with different people who believe different things, and I've had conversations with people who do tarot readings and all that kind of stuff. I had a tarot reading that had one part in particular that was extremely specific and, I would say, quote unquote, came true. But the one that I want to tell you mostly is this happened recently, about a year and a half ago. Me and my group of friends, some of us know each other from work, some of us know each other from friends of friends. Anyway, this one girl,
Can
she,
I ask just real quick?
sure,
Just real quick. What's your field of work?
I work at a bakery. I'll just say that.
Oh, yum. Okay.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
know,
I'm
right?
sorry. Continue.
No, it's okay. So one of our friends just started going to this psychic medium lady, at a local shop in town, and whatever, joke, haha. Anyway, she started really like giving like taking this person's advice, and we were all very much advising her to stop going, stop listening to this lady, because she was making extreme life changes based on what she was hearing in these readings, like changing her job, getting a different car, breaking up with her boyfriend, like, very
Oh
big
my.
changes. And we're like, you need to stop, you need to slow down, because this isn't right. You're giving this woman all your money and she's fucking with your life. She started telling us that this woman is telling her that she's sick, that there's a tumor inside her body, and that she needs to go to the doctors and demand tests. And so she went to her doctor and she demanded these tests, and the test said, you're fine, but she just kept going and demanding to see different doctors, different specialists, this, that, the other thing. And she kept going to this medium, and we were all very concerned about her. We were this close to calling an intervention about the amount of money she was spending on this medium when it should be going to her, to her to her child, all this stuff. And she came to us one day and said that the medium told her that they're going to find it really soon. There's a tumor in her brain, and she's going to have to get it removed, and her healing process is going to be very long. But to be optimistic, she's going to get through it. It's going to be okay, but this is going to happen very soon. So to prepare. In less than a week, the doctors called her, told her about a tumor they found in her brain, took her to the hospital, admitted her that day, and she had surgery. Her healing process was long, but she's okay. She's a lot better now. I can't explain that, but I don't think that it's true. I don't think that medium was actually talking to spirits or anything like that. But my friend, who, like you were saying, I know her character and I know who she is, and she wouldn't, make this stuff up. was saying how personalized this woman was getting with her and telling her things about her life, and how following her advice made her feel better, made her life better. And now with her health, this is just confirmation to her that she was going to the right person. And now she's looking at the rest of us thinking that we're all the crazy ones and we don't have anything that we can say about this. But that doesn't mean, at least I don't think it means, that I think that I should go and devote my life to learning about, Wicca and the spiritualness of that whole thing. And I don't think that I don't think you would give me that advice either from the story. Am I correct in assuming that?
I not quite. No, I
Okay.
would. I think I could explain this to you accurately, and I think after you hear my theory, I think it'll immediately be your best theory to use to explain this. But continue if there's. I'm not sure if you have more or not.
My question was, would your advice be that I should dedicate my life to this spiritualness of Wicca and stuff? And I said that I don't think you would, and you said not necessarily. So do you think that I should look into more into Wicca and tarot and all that stuff because of this?
Well,
Because I have my theories, but I'm not convinced that it's the truth just because this thing happened. And I will admit, out of everything spiritually claimed that I have seen personally, this is the most wow thing. So,
wow, this is very interesting to me. You really
yeah.
got me on the edge of my seat here.
Yeah. So what are
Okay.
your thoughts? I'd love to hear it.
Okay, and you have to forgive me. My eggs are not finished. I have melted some delicious cheddar cheese over them with a very spicy honey mustard, and I cannot let these go cold.
Oh, what are you doing to me, man? Oh
Um,
my gosh. That sounds
I'm
so
sorry,
good.
man.
Anyway,
I'm not baking, but so okay. This is what I'm gonna say. These eggs might have to go back on the on the saute pan. Um, and this is something that I think is largely unknown to Christians. Those of us that are more studied understand this. And by the way, I think a lot of the reason why you might have trouble with Christians answering questions properly is because the average Christian simply is not properly studied. Christians are lazy.
yeah,
So,
I would
anyways,
actually agree with that.
yeah, it's disappointing. Okay, I'm gonna read a few verses, and then I'm gonna pitch you the concept.
Okay.
Are you familiar? It seems like you're familiar with the Bible to a degree. Um, are you familiar with the book of Job and the story Harbored?
Yeah, it's been a minute since I've read Job, but yeah, I am familiar with Job and its story, as well as I would say the main point of it. So yeah.
Okay, yeah. God made a bet with the devil, and let's see if this guy can remain faithful after suffering terribly. Um, okay. In Job chapter 1, the target verse here is verse 7, but let me just as a refresher, I'll read it quickly. It says this, Job 1, verse 1. In the land of Uz, there lived a man whose name was Job. This man was blameless and upright. Very important descriptors. Blameless and upright. He feared God and shunned evil. Two more very important descriptors. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters, and he owned 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 donkeys, and had a large number of servants. He was the greatest man all the people of the East. So, like I don't know, Donald Trump or something. He's a head honcho, but not but with actual good heart and doesn't talk crazy on a mic, All right, verse 4. His sons used to hold feasts in their homes on their birthdays, and they would invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. When a period of feasting had run its course, Job would make arrangements for them to be purified. Early in the morning, he would sacrifice a burnt offering for each of them, thinking, "Perhaps my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts." This was Job's regular custom. Okay, that's our context here. So that kind of tells you about his character. Like he's not selfish. Instead, he's selfless. He's an altruistic man, and responsible, I would say, as a parent. Okay. Verse 6 and 7. This is the focal points here. One day the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them, which is very interesting. Verse 7. The Lord said to Satan, "Where have you come from?" Satan answered the Lord, "From roaming throughout the earth, going back and forth on it." That's it. We could read the rest of the story, but it's not going to harbor the point that I'm making. So, just grant me, I'm glad you used the word grant me that this is true, that God exists, the devil also exists, and he is a devious creature.
Grant you that the biblical God is true. Yes?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
As well as the devil. This is actually the what we're focusing on here is the devil.
Yeah.
He's described in the New Testament as an enemy to humanity, and his 3 primary purposes, or at least 3 primary initiatives, or his drive is to 1, steal, 2, I don't know if I can say this word, unalive, a word that rhymes with pill, and 3, destroy. Okay?
Right.
That's his character, that's his nature, that's what he's all about. So if you have an enemy who all they want to do is make you no longer breathe, and all of your family and all of your friends and your company and everyone you've ever known and anyone who also has DNA in their body, this is your enemy, okay? Your enemy is invisible. You cannot see him. Also, your enemy can go anywhere. That is stealth reconnaissance that the Marines would covet beyond anything. Any military would, I think, my opinion, never lose a war ever again, or even a battle, if they could recon in this way. You're invisible and you could hide inside of your enemy's camp and listen to all of their plans. That's why nations win wars, because of spies. Spies feed them the information. And as Sun Tzu, are you familiar with Sun Tzu?
No.
He's a ancient Asian warlord, and he a brilliant mind. But he people identified that he was pretty much like a mesh of a philosopher and psychologist. Not a psychologist, but he understood psychology very well, and that's why he was successful in his war campaigns, or just offensively and defensively. He understood the human mind. And if you understand your enemy's mind, well, I know how you're going to fight me. And as we see in boxing or UFC or whatever, if you can anticipate what your opponent is going to do, you can beat them because you know how to defend against it and be preemptive against it. Makes sense so far?
Yeah, I got you. And I just want to let you know I have about 10, 15 minutes left. So I don't mean to try to rush you, but are we getting
Okay.
to the point where when we get these hits or quote unquote confirmations for things like tarot readings, it's actually the devil and the spirit in some sort of test like thing just to try to trick the mind of humans to keep them away from God?
Well, let me just okay. I'll do this in 30 seconds. You're on the path.
Okay.
If the devil, all it would take for in your friend's case, to for the supernatural to be involved. The whole thing about psychics is they listen to spiritual beings, and I think it is almost always never God and only demons. Um, Demons have the same ability as the devil. Expert recon, and you're invisible. Nobody knows you're there. Um, all your friend would have to do is just utter things out loud that could be symptoms that pinpoint a tumor in the brain. All she has to do is say it out loud. And if demons are listening, they can take that, go to this psychic that they know she's going to visit because they hear her talking about this psychic, and convey that, whisper that to the psychic. And then the psychic has all this information about this person, and it's accurate. And it's the reason why I think a lot of Christians are fooled as well, because the devil and demons have power also, not to the same degree as God, but they do have power. And that, I think, is one of the abilities of them.
Sure,
So that's
and
my
when I
theory.
was a Christian, I would have said the exact same thing. That's what I believed for the longest amount of time. And I can't answer anything in regards to her own tarot sessions, but the one specifically that I had was very independent. I never went to that person more than once, and this was some random little shop at a Renaissance fair. Like, I didn't have any expectations for it in any sense. But I was quote unquote allowed to ask the spirits one question. And at this point in the entire conversation, we had only talked about school, my future, because I had just graduated high school, college, what I wanted to do for work, and my girlfriend. We didn't talk about my parents, we didn't talk about my siblings or anything like that, or what growing up was like. And so I asked something related to that, and I said, what is going to happen with my siblings and I? It was very vague. I had never mentioned my siblings or my parents or my family beforehand. And she looked at the cards that I drew for a moment, and she told me that she sees in the cards that currently there is a man, represented by the king, who is preventing me and my siblings from having a relationship. But not to worry, because in the future, the king is going to lose his power, and while he will still always be there, he will not be able to prevent us from talking. And while it will never be as good as it should have been, it'll still be good. And I asked her another question. I said, and when is that supposed to happen? And she looked at the cards again, and she told me in almost 7 years. And I was like, huh, all right. Well, and believe it or not, at that exact moment, it was true. My dad had kicked me out of the family, had actually gotten it legalized and through court orders that I could not see my siblings because he thought I was quote unquote a bad influence on them because I was no longer a good Christian child. And he kicked me out of the home, and he was preventing me from talking with them. And I did not have a relationship with them until almost 6.5 years later, when they graduated high school and started talking with them. It was 3 months before the 7 year mark. And I kept count. Never went back to that person again, never saw them. I don't know how any spirits would have gotten that information to tell her, because again, you would then have to give the spirits, the demons, a lot more power, because now they know the exact, time frames of the future and things like that, whereas how could they know that unless God gives them that information? In which case, it seems like it's God that's doing the deceiving and the toying around with people, and not the devil. They're just merely servants of God who is doing the toying. So either way, it doesn't seem like this is accurate to what is happening, even if we went with this answer. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, but I noticed something. Did you? I want to make sure I understand you right here. Did you say that your you weren't able to get back in touch with your siblings until they graduated from school?
Yeah, that we didn't start getting into contact again until they were graduating high school, which was almost 7 years later, which is what that woman told me.
And that's because they now have the freedom to do, talk to you, and the litigation held against you by your father is like lifted.
Yes, because the quote unquote king lost his power. He no longer had the legal right to tell them that they couldn't talk to me. And so they, by their own choice, stopped talking to him and gravitated towards myself and my mom.
Dude, that sounds to me like um seems like elementary demonic deductive reasoning. All they have to
Okay.
do is a bit of math to figure out, well,
How
what's
did they
the
know
most.
how old my siblings were? How did they know what was happening in my life at that time? If they're if these are the spirits that are surrounding this medium to whisper things to her, how do they know me, who's states away, who's only in town for that one day at this little rando Renaissance fair shop? How do they have that information?
Well, because they're a network. It's not like 13 demons spread across 50 states. It's hundreds and hundreds of them that convey information with each other like a military network. So all they have to do is hear from someone in the school or a friend of your siblings or whoever. All they have to hear is age or grade or something like that. Spread that, circulate that information amongst each other, along with millions of other people's stories throughout the world, connect dots and make like educated guesses at when you're gonna most likely. I think they play odds because they're not all knowing like God, but they're good at getting pretty accurate. And all they have to do is hear and figure out, well, when they graduate school, that's probably when they're going to come back. They'll be a family again and talk to each other. So they're just crunching numbers. That's
Sure,
not hard.
sure. And look, and like I said, I don't believe that this is true. I don't think that she had any actual magical abilities or anything like that. But this is granting the biblical perspective of the supernatural realm. And this is where it brings me to my point of if, because like we see this with Job, the example that you pointed out, that the devil couldn't do anything without God allowing him to do it. And we see this happen in other aspects too, where God sends spirits to lie and cause deceit and things like that so that his plan can come to fruition and bring him glory. When we see quote unquote confirmations, how can you say that that is not God also presenting that information, allowing that information to happen? And if so, how do we not place the blame then on God, saying that God is the one doing the manipulation and the toying, like what we see here in Job?
What? I must have missed something. Why would it be? What is God being blamed for here?
Because okay, because I was telling you the story and you brought up Job, and so I'm saying that if we're trying to compare this with Job, then it is God who is allowing these evil things to happen and is giving the devil and his agents permission to do it, giving them the guidelines and the boundaries of what they
Oh,
can do. So then, really, when it comes down
okay.
to it, evil cannot happen without God allowing it. So then, why are we not looking at God and saying, God is the one that's toying with people? Why are we not looking at him and saying, why is he doing this?
Okay, I see what you're saying. Well, ultimately, if you and that, it starts to sound like you really just don't like God. It sounds like there's
Well,
bias and agenda
I
there.
don't like the biblical character of God, but I don't know if this God is true, if the Bible is an accurate representation of him. That might also be the case. And if that's true, it might be that the book God is crappy, but the real God is good. Like I said, I want to believe what is true, but I want to have valid evidence and good foundation for my beliefs. So I don't know if the Bible is an accurate representation for a real God, but if that is the case, then yeah, I have major problems with that God.
Okay, well, you have to recognize though that say there's a I don't know some authoritative um, let's say like a cartel member, some guy that you know you used to go to school with, and you guys separated. You never liked the guy, and in fact, you can't stand him. And he joined a cartel, and this guy orders one of his little subject minion cartel guys to go and beat up one of your siblings. You have two people that you could blame. But you're going to blame the guy you don't like, not the guy who's actually laying hands on your sibling, but the guy that's calling the shots. And the reason for that, it's predicated on your bias against him. So there's something to be
Well,
seen
I would actually
there.
say that depends. That depends on if the devil can resist what he is commanded by God. I don't think that if it's God's will and he wants it to happen, that you can resist. So if the devil literally has no choice and is being forced to do it via God's will and enforcement, then again the blame all just goes to God. But if we're talking about like your example of the mafia leader sending someone to beat up me or my family, I blame both absolutely. But here's the third situation. It seems like when I talk to believers about this, they are willing to blame the person laying hands on me and the family, but they're not willing to blame the mafia boss. I'm saying both are definitely at fault here. And if the devil has the ability to resist God's commands, then the devil is also at fault, because he could say, no, that's fucked up, I don't want to do it. But he chose to do it and wanted to do it, it seems. So yeah, I would blame both as well. But the thing is, why are you excusing the mafia boss and I'm not, and yet somehow I'm the one being illogical and biased? Do you see what
No,
I'm
no,
saying?
yeah. I get
Sure.
that there's,
So
the,
why do you excuse the mafia boss? And this is unfortunately my last question, because I do have to get going. I have to meet some people for lunch soon. So why
oh,
should we
sure, sure.
excuse the mafia boss and only be mad at the henchman?
Well, and that's not the point I was making. The only point I was making is it seems like your emotions are uh, clouding proper judgment.
Why, when I just agreed
Um,
with you that I would blame both the henchman and the mafia boss, but I pointed out the flaw in the argument you presented, that you also have to blame the mafia boss. I don't think that that's a point you can just ignore because it wasn't the one you wanted to make.
well, and it's
Good
you have
morning,
to
Dallas
excuse me.
Captain.
Is probably not a great analogy because in this case, the a mafia boss does not extend eternal life. God does. So, and there, a whole plethora of characteristics of God that are only purely good. Um, so not a great example, but I was just isolating a piece of what I recognize there.
All right. Well, thank you for your
There's
time,
a lot more
and
I could go into, but well, yeah, we'll,
yeah,
we'll reconvene sometime.
yeah, definitely. If you have another set of free time or whatever, go ahead, shoot me a message. I'd love to continue the conversation at another date.
All right, sounds
All
good,
right.
man. Enjoyed it. I'll catch you later.
Yeah, thanks for your time, and I hope you have a great day.